Yeah.
Yeah, we have. Let's see, you met Laddie.
He came last year, you had just gotten him.
Okay, oh, okay, Chloe. Yeah, that's right, okay. Yes.
You have, well, yeah, the new dog,
The
right.
new dog, and left a little present on the floor. Yeah, he doesn't do that anymore.
When you touch this button right here, that means you're patting his head. When you do this, easy. You're scratching his ear.
So he does something
He makes
different
a
where you
lot of
touch
noise
him?
though, don't you think?
Yeah, but only there's one thing you can make him stop doing everything.
Would you push his nose?
Yeah,
It
and now
doesn't
he's
hurt him.
sniffing.
Oh, it's sniffing you? Yes. What's his name?
Techno.
Oh,
Techno.
oh, he doesn't have a little pet name of some
No.
sort? Like
No. Did you bring his bone?
No,
Oh,
I
you
forgot his bone.
Forgot his bone? He has a
What
little
happens
old
if you
bone.
give him a bone?
And when you have the techno bone, you put it right here, and it'll make an even sound. See?
Oh,
Yeah.
That is really neat. Now I know what they do. I
Yeah.
never knew.
There's a cat one, and what else is there, JJ? A parrot one?
Oh, no? Yeah, there's a fair one, and it's guess what? They can actually copy what you say.
Oh.
This is a picture of the cat.
Oh boy.
Oh man, that looks like a pretty big cat.
Isn't that a pretty, yeah.
Looks
like a
black bear to me.
It's a black cat.
Yeah.
Whoops. Let me get these scissors out of here before we... Something bad.
Oh, what did you do?
Thank you.
So now you have to send us some, so we keep up with the Amber and the, is there an
Emily and-
Emily,
Yeah,
yeah.
I need some, I hope
And Garrett and, no, Garrett and,
Garrett, Ross has boys and Sharon has girls.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
Yeah.
Now in Brandon's his dad's side, they're all girls, and he's the only boy.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Just the opposite of Jenny. She's
Yeah.
one Ashley and then all
Ashley,
boys, one girl
yeah.
and all
Oh,
boys.
that's nice, yeah. Yeah, that means
Who's
this
over there?
anymore.
Who's that?
That means that.
Here's the entrance to our gym. And down the hall. What is this white stuff? All the way around. The storage room. Ooh, all white. All white. Yep, there's the kitchen. And back to there. See if we can look up. This is the top side.
the tent now. You may need eating. This buffet, so go head towards the buffet and grab your food now.
think so? I just want to get this part around. Right there. The pumpkin. It's a pumpkin. Look up. Hi. Over there. Look up and get the little bird. You see it? Go. Hey, happy Halloween. Oops. And let me zoom in. There's JJ. Check out his great face. Yeah, Chloe.
Good. Chloe?
We've been trick-or-treating tonight. It's really fun. And you had how many pieces of candy?
31.
One. And a bunch of prizes. And it was the greatest. He's G.I. Joe. A great guy. Okay.
Home down my first day down there and coming out to get on the van, and then he stopped it, and then during the church service Sunday morning, pastor told everybody that I was leaving, and he said, you know, when I first came here, Dorothy had to wear clip-on glasses to read the notes in order to play the piano, which I did, and there wasn't anybody else there to play when I was playing there. So he says, now they don't do her any good. And he says, her eyes are so bad, but he says, all she needs is to get the pitch of him, and she can play anything. Well, of course, that's not quite true. But I do have a pretty good ear. I guess I got that from
Oh,
Danny.
you can do a lot that way, yeah.
Yeah, so, and then he says, Dorothy, come up to the piano. And I didn't know what in the world was going to happen. He says, now play your piece. He knows the song I want played at my funeral, and he calls it my piece. And every now and then when we'd have a sing-along Sunday night, I'd ask for it. So he knew what it was, and he said, now you play it through once, and then the congregation will sing a couple verses. I tell you, it was a thrill of my life, just to know he was that thoughtful. And he says, and we're going to have a party tonight after church, and we're going to have fun. And we did. See the picture over there of the John Deere?
Yeah.
They had that wrapped up as a gift to me, and they gave it to me, and he says, now it can be told that Dorothy Bull paid for that riding. I don't like for people to know in the church.
Yeah, sure.
When I give anything, and I told him, I said,
they named it,
Oh, Dottie, how about
he says,
that?
oh, I'm going to put your
Yeah,
name
hold
on
that
the
up
front
here.
of it. I said, no, you're not.
Is that too close?
He was a real tease. But now, later, they did put the name on, just as I was leaving. And one of the ladies got that picture, or took the picture and had it enlarged and framed for me. And he says, now put that in your living room. So, of course, I have.
Well, I saw that. I thought, well, did Robert drive that, or?
No.
Okay, you can put it back
So
in
that
there.
cuts all that,
Let's see, it
they
won't,
have such a lot of land there.
Yes, they do, but of course, a lot of it's condemned, more or less. They can't build on all of it.
Really? Why not?
It's
Too
like
low?
a pond out of ways from the church, and I forget what they call it.
Swampland or something?
Something. It has a name.
Mhm.
but I don't-
Wetland.
guess so. Of course, this building's built on wetlands,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know how they get around it.
Yeah.
You have to
but
put a whole lot of pilings down in the.
I guess, I
in the
don't know,
ground.
but in case of a hurricane, we have to get out.
Hmm.
Can't
Oh.
stay here.
Can't stay here.
Now, in Florida, where I lived, we could stay there in a hurricane.
Hmm.
But
Well, that was a concrete building. This is probably not a concrete building.
I don't know whether that was
No, I think it was. I mean, you had glass in it too, but it was a concrete structure. To be that tall
Well, no, she's talking
on the
about,
coast, where
remember
she left.
Oh,
Where-
no, I don't
No,
mean
she means the
Ocean's
condominium.
10. I
Yeah,
mean
she
where
meant
I,
in the home.
in the
Oh,
home,
oh, okay.
Yeah, we didn't.
Oh, okay.
That was
I
just
she never
three-
visited you there.
3 stories. No, I had to leave Ocean's
Daytona.
10 when a hurricane.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
Oh.
But Robert said he was not going to do it again. He went once. But
Uh,
you'd almost have to. They
You never
probably-
know.
Well,
Yeah,
they
well, that- you were
probably
right on
would
the
turn
ocean.
the water off
Right.
Mhm.
and the power and things like that, don't you think?
oh, yeah,
Yeah,
probably.
to-
Yeah.
To keep fires down and, yeah.
So
Yeah.
And
I
where
don't
did you
know.
go when you had to leave there?
one of the ladies in the church lived over close to the church.
Oh.
Asked for us to come over and stay with her.
Huh.
She had a guest room.
Uh-huh.
Then Greg and I left once when a hurricane was blowing, and we went over one house we were invited to stay in Port Orange, but we didn't stay there. We went in and we looked it over. It had a cathedral ceiling,
Hmm.
and I thought to myself, I can just see the wind getting under this roof, and I don't want to stay here. So
Yeah.
we had been invited to go to Friend's Villa in Sarasota. One of the ladies
Hmm.
that lived in Ocean's 10, a French lady,
Hmm.
had lots of money,
Oh,
and she had a villa, and it was more fun seeing that
oh, I'll
villa.
bet. Wow.
Oh boy, it was something like a museum. I'm not
Oh.
kidding. You walk in the front door and you look like you could see forever almost. Building was so long.
Oh, my. Well, that's good to have friends like that.
Yeah, and she's dead now,
Uh,
but
Oh.
she was a nice friend. She came over and took
Well-
me out to lunch with some of the ladies one day. It was very nice.
well, now, if you had to leave here, could you go to Sandra's? She doesn't have to evacuate, does she?
Not
Or
that
is
I
she-
know of. No, Sandra said she'd come get me.
Uh-huh.
And of course, the company has arrangements to get buses and take
Ah.
everybody down to Lexington, South Carolina, I think it
Hmm.
is, where there's another
that would-
home like this.
But that would be a chore.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I
real
guess it
chore.
would. So
Get
I
the-
guess I would go with Sandra.
Oh,
Yeah. Then I wonder if you could get back in this building, if you needed something, if it didn't hit right here or something. You could probably get back in quicker from Sandra's, too, for,
Could be.
yeah. Huh.
Mhm.
Oh, well. Yeah.
Well, I'm not worried about that. I've been in Florida long enough now.
Oh, yeah, you've weathered a few storms down there, haven't you?
And I never really was in a hurricane.
Uh,
Even that first time Robert and I left, we didn't even have a rainstorm that day.
oh, my.
well, see, they can predict, and it just
Mhm.
doesn't always happen.
No,
Yeah, hurricanes, they haven't figured them out yet.
no, not too well.
Oh, my.
Did you hear about this plane going down?
No, no, what is that? I heard,
Oh,
You're
American
talking-
Airline, I forget what number it was, but it was an Airbus actually, took off to go to Santo Domingo with 247 people.
oh,
And they had engine trouble. One engine fell off evidently and caught fire as it fell. I don't know which, but anyway, the plane went up in smoke.
oh, wow.
They first didn't know whether it was leaving or arriving, but I guess they found out for sure
Huh,
that it was leaving. They had 9 crew members,
huh.
but
So they go down just outside of New York? Is that what I heard someone say
I
downstairs?
guess they're in the Queens,
Oh,
wherever
huh.
that is,
Yeah,
in the
wow.
Rockaway section of Queens, I think.
Huh, wow.
So it caused fires. I don't know how many homes, but on some of the homes caught
Mm.
fire.
Is anybody on the ground killed, you think?
Hmm?
Anybody on the ground killed?
I don't know. They didn't have many details at all.
No, well, but
They
it'll be
wouldn't.
on all
Yeah,
that.
it'll be on later.
But
Wow.
they don't think it was terrorists back then.
No, they don't.
Yeah, everything.
So I'm glad of that. As bad as it is, I'm glad it wasn't
Yeah.
terrorists. Because that November September the 11th, that was horrible.
Yeah.
We've been by the Pentagon. Well, she saw it.
Yeah.
So you should see the Pentagon now. They tore out the outer 3 rings, right where the plane hit. It's just completely open now. So they had to tear all that concrete and everything out just because it was so hot. Everything was just damaged beyond use. It wouldn't hold up. So they've torn out 3 rings. What was it? Probably almost 100 feet wide there or so. Yeah. So all that you saw on TV that was black and the part that fell in,
Yeah.
well, they've torn out the part to the left of where it fell in. It's a big, wide opening now. Probably, what, a quarter of the side of the building at least.
Yeah.
You know, right, sort of just off center to the right, is all
Was that
gone
the newer
now.
part or the older part?
Well, the renovation, I think, has taken place in part of that anyway. I think they said the plane hit right on the edge of what they had just finished renovating.
And
So-
the glass didn't break on that?
Oh, yeah, they
side?
had
It was
shatterproof glass. That one window in the top right-hand corner, right where it fell in, that was shatterproof glass, did not budge. But each window weighs a ton. Is it any wonder that it didn't shatter? Oh, my, that was something.
That was
Amazing.
amazing. Yeah.
Huh.
So they were getting ready for something.
Oh, yeah, well, they knew they had to be prepared for something there, yeah.
Yeah, Greg was right downtown. He took Jackie to work
Yeah.
that morning.
Right. She ended up coming out to our house and waiting.
Oh, that's
for,
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's right.
Her boss
Tell me
said,
that.
you know, I'll take you home or take you to my house. And she said, well, how about to to Greg's cousin's house? And all that was kind of in the same vicinity. And said, sure, come on over. You know, and I was just waiting to see if I should pick up the boys at school, and I called to find out. I didn't want them to see it on TV at school without
Yeah.
all of us, you know, having something to say. And
Yeah.
they weren't showing it, so they said, you can come pick them up now, or you can come at the end of the school day. We have tight security and, you know, everything, so I said, I
So
think we'll
did
just
Jackie
wait.
come to your house after I talked to you then? I kept
Yeah.
trying to get you, and
Mhm, mhm.
finally when I get through.
Right,
Must
yeah.
I didn't
It
know
was kind of-
Jackie came to
Yeah,
your
it was
house.
kind of busy because she came, and then I had to go pick up the boys at school, and then I guess Greg no, I don't think did I see Greg, or you saw him? I said, well, I better go get the boys, and then by the time I got back, they may have been gone, so it was kind of a, you know,
Mhm.
mixing time, and I was, yeah.
So is Greg in school?
Yes, I think he is. I don't know. He's having an awful struggle. He could not get a room in the dorm this year. The
Oh.
college brought in a lot of new students and took dorm rooms away from the seminary.
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 Seminary. Yeah.
And
Oh, wow.
he tried to find a room or something in Maryland, but of course he couldn't afford an apartment.
Mhm.
It costs so much, and people don't rent rooms anymore today.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, he's not had any good fortune finding a room, I know that.
Yeah,
And
that's
so-
a shame.
So he's driving around that beltway twice every day,
Hmm.
if he's still doing it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't blame him if he stopped, because that must be an awful drag.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Now, I got an A in Greek, he told us.
Yeah, he's
Yeah, he got an A in Greek.
managed, well, I don't know what he's done according to the end of the semester, I don't know.
Oh.
But he usually does get A in Greek. That's his easy subject.
I think that's his favorite subject, too.
Yeah, it
is.
If there could be some formula that you could get children to do well in subjects that they aren't motivated in, that would be
Yeah,
really
right.
nice.
Mhm.
Because I tell you, Brandon likes chemistry. And he's memorized the periodic table just about,
Oh, wow.
that chemical thing that I did in high school. And he's just real interested. And then social studies he was interested in, but he's kind of lost a little interest in what they're studying now. But, you know, and then JJ really likes math and things, so he really... Oh, you don't? Oh, okay.
This table doesn't look very nice here. If you
Oh,
really-
it's perfect there. You gotta have it there. You need it
Well,
there.
if I take a nap, I have to have this to set the time or I'd never wake up
Oh.
to meet my schedule, you know.
Mhm.
And
Keeps you going, yeah, you have everything right
I
there.
don't know. I have to have things at my fingertips.
Yes.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Now, what,
February 1st. I
Oh.
sent all the cards the same time because I could never remember.
So February 3rd, it's her birthday and Greg's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Malcolm's the February 1st. Uh-huh.
okay, so now we go for the years. You got the year on there?
1915.
1915, okay.
Gee, you were older than my dad? Shucks.
Oh, yes.
By what, 3? No, 5 years.
No,
He was 1918.
maybe 4 years.
You were born 1918.
Oh, 15. Yes, 3 years. Okay. Yeah, how about that? Yeah. Well, see, what I want to know about,
Yes.
because not too long ago, I came across an old photocopy of, must have been a late 1960s, I think it was 68, picture from the Washington Star that showed an old house with a bulldozer in front of it, and the bulldozer had lifted up on it, and the whole house had just tipped over backwards.
Yeah.
It didn't fall apart, it was solid. And I remember the day a man brought that to my dad and said, thought you might like this because this was your old house on Military Road there. And so I thought, oh good, well I'll get a better picture of this at the library on the microfilm. Well, I went in there, I found the exact date, the same paper of course, exact date, and the exact page number, and it wasn't there. And come to find out, this picture was in an upper corner, so I had the page number, see, and the date right on the picture, but it had no stars after it. The one that I saw had 5 stars. They said that was a final edition, and they wanted the final edition because it had all the stock closings in it. So I guess our picture got bumped out of the later editions to make room for the stock report. So I never have been able to find another copy of that anywhere. I'll have to, see if somebody has an archive of these things somewhere that's not on microfilm. But even then, why would they have necessarily the early editions?
So I've had that picture, and I was always clipping out things and pasting them in books, but I don't know what happened to it.
But you do remember when it was moved then?
Well, torn down is what it was.
Yeah, I remember
Tear
that.
it down then?
I don't know whether I drove by and saw it. I don't remember that, but I saw the picture.
What's really neat is, too, in front of the house, or just diagonally in front, because it was taken at a sort of a diagonal picture, is about a 1967 or 68 Mercury Comet car, which was the same year as my first car that I had. So I thought that was kind of neat that car was sitting in front of the house that was being torn down. Well, now, was there a second house? I seem to remember my dad saying there was a second house.
Well, that was the second house.
Okay, so where was the first house?
Right next door, the older home that's set back a little ways.
Set back a little bit.
When we-
Now, was that closer to Lee Highway or further from Lee Highway?
Closer to
Closer to Lee Highway.
When we bought the
Okay.
property, that's the only house that was on it,
Oh, I see.
the older house.
Well, then, did you split the property or just rent the house out, or why was a second house built?
Well, because we didn't want to live in the old house. There was no electricity, no plumbing,
Oh,
and so we had the new house built for us to live in.
I see.
But then the Depression struck, and your grandfather's, who was your grandfather?
Yeah.
His salary was cut right in half.
Ah.
He didn't make a whole lot to begin with,
Uh-huh.
as automobile mechanic. But anyway, then we couldn't afford to live in the new house. I guess
Oh.
we couldn't afford the payments on
Payments,
the mortgage. I don't
uh-huh.
know. But we sold it. Nanny got so mad at the settlement. The day we settled on that, there was a little bit of money that was coming to she and Daddy. I don't know how come, but anyway, he turns around and he says, "Now, Mr. and Mrs. Trice, you haven't been married long. I'll just give you that for a wedding present." Oh, boy. I don't know how much money it was, but if it was anything was a lot.
Yeah, in those days, yeah, really.
And Nanny was so upset about that.
Did Aunt Myrtle and Uncle Benny live there at one time?
Not in that new house.
Not in that one.
No. No, Now, she may have come in there more or less as a guest when she was having her boarder out. Seems to me like I remember seeing her in the bed in the master bedroom. But that was just temporary. No, she and Uncle Benny lived with us in the old house.
Hmm. So then did you move back into the old house? What'd you do, subdivide the lot, I guess? And sell off the new house?
Yeah, I guess so. 11 o'clock, or is that 12?
That's 12 o'clock.
Well, we better get ready to go down.
Okay, yeah.
But no, we had plumbing put in, one bathroom, whole house, and we had rented out the upstairs, the two rooms upstairs, made into an apartment. And then we used one bedroom. My grandmother and I slept in that as a rule. And then I think maybe Jack had to come up. I'm not sure. But Aunt Myrtle and Uncle Benny wanted to help Nanny out, so they moved into the downstairs room on the left that was separate, like. I'm confused, but it seems like I slept down there too some. I don't know. I guess we went through a lot of changes.
A lot of changes, yeah, for sure.
And that was very temporary, I guess, because they turned the garage into a home.
Oh.
And Aunt Myrtle and Uncle Benny either bought that or rented it. I don't know which. And in the loft of the garage, which did they do? I don't know. Either first floor was the bedroom, or else up on what they call the loft upstairs. It was a big garage, concrete garage.
Oh.
And
Cherrydale cement block?
I don't know.
Probably.
Could have been. Could have been. We better get ready to go down.
Okay.
Go down now.
But we was parked in the driveway waiting for me when I was in high school. And I had to go to the outhouse, and I had to go.
Oh, my.
And they saw me go back and forth.
Okay.
Great life.
Great life.
And what was that address, that last one? Do you remember?
Seems like it was 16 something. The address changed every now and then.
Yeah.
First it was one thing and then another.
So you want to go in the van?
When I started eating, I wasn't a child, but I have them here each day. I have eggs every day. Since I've been here. I didn't get them in Florida. But they'll cook them any way you want. And so it worried me. I thought, well, my cholesterol will go up now, I guess. But no, it's come down a little. Really? 146.
Oh, wonderful.
I think it had been 160 something.
Wow.
And I think the oatmeal maybe counteracts
Oatmeal does a really good job.
I've got to get back on my oatmeal.
real oatmeal. Don't use instant.
Oh, really?
No, that's full of salt.
Well, I use it right out of the box. That's a real thing. The real oatmeal.
Yeah, just not the ones in the box.
Oh, not the, well, that's, you're just real.
And I put a few raisins in.
Well, my parents are big oatmeal people. They put nuts and all kinds of things.
Like raisins
Well, I ate breakfast this morning when I was tired, Southern Baptist minister. It was good living. I'm not looking for one, but it's working. And then also a retired Lutheran pastor.
This is her lobby, grand entrance.
Sandra. I tried to pay Dorothy Flood. I'll get her coming this way.
What?
hand down. Put your hand down.
You're being remembered this way,
Oh,
see?
you're taking my picture? Oh, my goodness.
You gonna walk that way?
One person goes that way and the other two.
Okay.
You go
I'll
that way.
And you two go that way? Or do you two want to go that way?
Raise your hand if you
And
want
there's
to go.
Dorothy's little
that way.
balcony. Right
Raise
up
your hand
there
if you want to go that way.
with the wind
I do.
chimes.
I want to go that way.
Okay.
And you two go that way and you can wave at Aunt Dorothy. Maybe
Yeah.
her place is up there.
Don't stop. Good.
Sorry, this is Dorothy's little corner
Good.
on the world. And her window's up there. And she looks into the woods. Really nice setting. There's the sun, of course. Got that in there for you. Oh, there's nice surroundings here. And back to the beautiful walkway. Okay.
Ring, 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 ring.
Here we are. JJ has the Palm Pilot. And this is the nice entrance here. Thank you. This is the nice entrance here.
See you later, Dad.
Bye, JJ. See ya.
Be careful.
People, they can enjoy these. And I've got, when my niece was up from Florida, I had her take all of her pictures and her brothers, all that side of the family. Because it's not anything that these kids will care about. But Jenny was going to make up an album, 2 albums, one for each of her brothers. So she had pictures. So I'm trying to go through that oldest album and give pictures to somebody that will enjoy them. See, Susie got in.
How'd you get in?
Hi, she left it unlocked for me.
Yeah.
Part of the
there's a lot
family.
for us, too.
Here's the tripod.
Okay.
Yeah. And here's some crayons.
Sandra looks good. She looks wonderful. But then she always does.
Yeah.
Well, I want to know a little bit. I want to know when this lady over here came along in your brother's life, what did the family think of her? Was she okay, or was she just a country girl out there, or what did the family think of her?
Oh, they thought she was pretty special.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you one thing my mother-in-law didn't like about me.
Oh
Uh-oh.
no.
I never wore a hat. And she told Jack that I would be fine if I just wear a hat.
Oh no.
Always wore hats to church and everything.
Did she?
Oh, my.
Oh my.
That's funny.
So,
Well, that's pretty minor.
well, then I also want to know, how many girlfriends did you used to have at a time?
Jack, I don't know.
You didn't keep up with him, huh?
No, we went our separate ways.
Oh, you did, huh?
Yeah.
Dating.
Well, dating, and well, even before that, even as children, we weren't real close. He had his own mind set up.
Uh-huh.
We were playing. He had to have things his way.
Well, now, I know of one picture of him and you in the same picture over standing by a little log, it looks like, well, a little stick cabin.
Log house.
Now, was that on the same property we were talking about earlier?
Yeah, that was
in
out in
Cherrydale?
the back of the new house.
Ah, uh-huh.
Mhm.
So at least he got you in the same picture there, huh?
Oh yeah, I don't know.
Who probably took that picture? With Nanny or
I guess Nanny.
Grandpa?
I
Whatever?
don't know. We just had a square camera.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Yeah, nothing fancy, huh? How about that?
Did you build it together?
No, I don't think so.
He built.
I expect he had his daddy help him.
Uh-huh,
'Cause he
uh-huh.
would have had to have had help.
Yeah, yeah. So I
But
guess
it was a cute thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it was on our low home stationery.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, yeah.
That
That was
was
the
pretty.
fun part. Yeah, that's what I remember seeing it on.
Mhm.
Oh my. Well, a little bit more about Cherrydale. You mentioned, who'd you say, oh dear,
Aunt Myrtle.
Aunt Myrtle and Uncle Benny lived with
Oh.
you or near you there.
Yeah.
Now, where else, did they live somewhere else in Cherrydale as well, or was it you just,
Well, before they moved in with us, they had a home down in what's called Thrifton, I think. That's south of, or close, like going to Washington.
okay,
And
okay.
you turn off the Lee Highway in front of what used to be the Old Dominion Bank.
Ah.
Go one long block and turn right, and go down there a couple blocks and turn left. And then they were over, the elevation was high above the Memorial Parkway Drive.
Uh-huh.
And, yeah, I remember the house that they lived in down there. In fact, she had 2 homes on that lot, too. So she and my mother were very good at making money on the side. A little extra spending money, you know. And I don't know whether the 2 homes were there when she bought the property or whether they had the second one built on the back afterwards. I don't know which, but she kept the house rented out that was on the front.
Uh-huh.
And she and Uncle Benny lived in the one in the back.
Now, was that Dominion Bank you mentioned, was that the one, that did that sit between the Lee Highway and the railroad?
Yeah.
That's what was the big bank. Okay, so it's down around probably Nelson or Monroe Street now, but anyway, okay. I'm just trying to keep everything. They just widened, or improved, shall we say, the center of Lee Highway down there in front of Ivy Welding and all that over there, which is probably about where you're talking about, maybe just a little bit below. And they finally took out the old concrete front, which used to be the ice house loading dock. Do you remember the ice house that was down probably a little bit further than the bank? No, because there was some kind of an ice house there. And actually, I guess the Cherrydale Cement Block Company is now the auto parts store. But that's about, just about across Lee Highway from that is where they had the old ice house. But, you know if you remembered that or not.
No, I didn't remember.
That wasn't a girl thing, huh?
No. I think there was another ice house in Cherrydale, but it was up higher.
Well, now, the bank wasn't way down in the very bottom, was it? Before you started back up the hill going towards Roslyn? There's kind of where Spout Run is now.
Oh, no, the bank was in Cherrydale.
Up in Cherrydale, okay. I thought that was what you meant.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, because I'm getting a little bit involved with our neighborhood civic association now in Cherrydale, and trying to, I should say there's one lady that lives there that's our historian, and she actually has worked with, or does work with, the National Geographic and things like that, or, excuse me, the Smithsonian she works with. And we've done some walking tours through old Cherrydale up on near St. Agnes School and up the hill there.
Really?
And she has pointed out many homes that were Sears homes, Sears kit homes. And
Yeah, Robert Walls was.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, how about that?
I didn't realize it at the time, but he told me after we were married it was.
Where did Robert live when he lived in there?
He lived on the block behind Aunt Merle and Uncle Benny. And if I could draw it on paper, I could show you, but it's kind of hard to describe. But just one block before
You want to draw it
their house, if I could see.
sort of, if you can
Have
zoom
you
in.
got something to, there's head the bottom.
Oh,
Well, let's see.
here you go.
I'm going to start with Old Dominion Bank.
Okay.
I'll take you down. There might have been a couple of little streets in there, I don't know for sure. But then you turned right, went back to Aunt Myrtle and Uncle Benny's, and just before that street, there was another street where the Walls lived.
Ah, Huh.
Or Robert and his mother lived on this street here behind him.
Ah,
But
How
does
about
that make it any plainer?
Yeah, no, that helps a lot, yeah. But that's Lee
Beautiful
Highway at the
drawing.
bottom with the Dominion Bank down
Yeah,
there.
Dominion Bank's down here,
Uh-huh.
and the highway split.
Ah.
I guess it's all together now.
Well, the old railroad is now one lane of highway, and the other lane is, what was the highway is just one direction, so
Uh-huh,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it goes two ways there. Huh, well that's neat. Well, I won't make you hold that here. Draw it again some, yeah. Well, because I'm, you know, as I say, I'm trying to get involved, and I found these neighbors are quite the historians there, and they,
Who is this lady?
Kathy Holt was her maiden name. Her mom evidently grew up there in, well, they lived in Cherry. Kathy's been there her whole life, shall we say. She's now Kathy Holt Springsteen. She married a guy there, and they live in a house, oh boy, I won't remember the name or the number of the street, but it was, they call it the bottle house or the can house, I forget which it is, but they made it out of a concrete forms. The walls were formed in concrete. And so if the guy could save money on concrete, he'd throw all his bottles and cans in the walls. So if they're kind of hollow, he says you have to be real careful when you nail something in the wall. You don't know what you're going to hit, if you're going to get anything hung in there or not. But yeah, but she's shown us several of the Sears houses too, and that's what I thought was kind of neat, the kid homes. And of course, she showed us some that were, you know, wannabes. They were, you know, Montgomery Ward or some other, or some builder that copied a lot of them. But she's given us a lot of history. Now, the one other thing I want to try and clear up here too, when Cherrydale Baptist Church built their first building up on Quebec Street, I think it was.
Yeah.
That was just a one-story or one-room, I think, building, if I'm not mistaken, which was probably just for the church meeting.
The original building
Yeah.
was one room with a basement.
Oh, they did build a basement. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then later, after they built the newer building, they used the original building just for prayer meeting and Sunday school rooms. And also the basement was used for Sunday school.
Yeah. Well, I remember being in that basement for Sunday school, so yes, I remember that. Now, what do you remember prior to them building the building? I'm told they met in a building called Scott Hall.
I don't
That the
know.
Scott family, there were evidently several Scotts in the area, but I don't think they were affiliated with the church. But other people that have shared their history of Cherrydale said that there was Scott Hall, which one person described, I only have this documented from one person, was up on the street where St. Agnes School is now. Up, well, I won't try and even guess the name of the street, but I just wondered if you had any memory of Scott Hall.
No.
No.
I haven't even heard of the Scotts.
Do you remember any other place the church met before they built the building, or were you around?
I wasn't affiliated with it.
Okay.
I didn't join Cherrydale until 1937 or so.
Okay.
But I think they started with like Bible study or prayer meetings in somebody's home.
Right, I think that was the Newman's home, right? It's the name I remember. Yeah.
Tell him where you and your grandmother used to go to church.
Oh, yes.
We went to the Nazarene Church in Park Lane. And she was living with Aunt Myrtle and Uncle Benny in Georgetown on M Street. She'd take a bus or a streetcar, and come out and get off at what became Adams Street. I don't know what it is now. And Nanny and Daddy and your daddy and I lived in a little bungalow in that first block right off of Lee Highway.
Oh.
And Grandmother would walk over to our home and pick me up. I wasn't even going to school then. I don't know how old I was, but I was quite young. And she and I would walk side streets parallel to Lee Highway over to the church, Sunday school and church.
It's still there.
Well, there is still the First Nazarene Church of Arlington. It's probably not the same building you went to.
Oh, no.
But
the building I went to now, I think, has been rented out by American Legion or something like that.
Oh, really?
And they took the steeple off.
Oh, no fooling. Huh.
It's still on top of the hill.
How about that?
And so that was grandmother who took you?
Connor.
Connor, right, yeah.
Of course, I called her nanny too.
Yeah, that's the trouble. There are two nannies in that family, yeah.
There's one Marcy that we can still get a hold of. I've tried to get he and Marcy together. He grew up in Cherrydale.
Frank Marcy?
Ed Marcy. Younger than Frank, I think.
I don't
Ed's
know.
even,
I
well,
don't know.
younger than Jack was.
Mhm.
But he grew up in Cherrydale, and I know he could give him,
Even more history.
but they just haven't gotten
But
together.
you said he lives out in the valley near you now, doesn't he?
His wife passed away, and they live not near me, but out in the country or something.
Okay. Huh. How about that? Oh, what else? Oh, do you remember the Tucker dealership? The Tucker automobile dealership that was in Cherrydale? I just know there's, me and cars, I kind of, I found out there was one evidently right sort of beside your property, between Lee Highway and you, where the Exxon station is now. I'm told that was the Tucker, and of course that was very short-lived. So unless you followed cars, you wouldn't have known that. So anyway,
No, because I was 8 years old when I moved to Cherrydale.
Okay.
Well, we moved from that house in Adams Street over below Lyon Park, Presnell Park they call it.
Presnell. So that's not what they call Roslyn now, is it?
Oh no,
It was
Presnell
further.
Park was going toward Alexandria.
Okay.
And there's a railroad that ran right in front of our house.
Oh.
After we moved from Presnell Park up into Lyon Park. There's a railroad went straight in front of our house going toward Alexandria. And down that way. I don't know, but I was 6 years old when we moved up in the house on Lyon Park. I had to walk all the way from there to the school in Clarendon, go to school, the grammar school there,
That's a walk.
on Wilson Boulevard. It was a good little walk.
Yeah.
But then when we moved to Cherrydale, I was 8. And I went into the 3rd grade.
Was Cherrydale School there then?
So that was weren't there two, was there a new building and an old building or something?
The old building, I don't know how old it was. I think maybe it was built back in World War I. But it was quite old. But I think they condemned it.
Oh.
The reason they didn't use it much. It was used a little bit, but it was an auditorium built on the back of it, where we had assemblies once a week. And I think I told about that on the tape. We used to sing patriotic songs, folk songs. It was lots of fun.
And then where did you go to high school?
Washington and Lee.
That's right.
I walked over there too. Yeah.
But middle school or junior high, where did you go?
Washington and Lee. It was all built in. Junior high and high school was all together there.
Oh, okay. So 7 through 12.
Yeah, well, there was a little division in it. Junior high was considered 7 and 8.
Okay.
And then 9 on up was high school.
Miss Susie graduated from Washington Lee High School.
Did you? What year?
And my sister, 71.
Oh.
Yeah, Debbie graduated in 76.
And Robert graduated from Washington and Lee from night school.
Oh.
He's in the same album book that I graduated in 33, I think.
Oh, really?
There's just a few pictures of the night school graduates in there.
Wow. Well, that's something. Go to night school for high school.
Yeah. Well, he had to stop and go to work. His father died when he was young. And so I guess that's why I don't know.
Don't remember, yeah. But you knew him from, he was the youth director, or helped with the youth, and he played piano?
Sunday nights he directed the youth meetings, and he didn't have anybody to play the piano. And they sang a lot of choruses too, and which like Mrs. Foster wouldn't have known, or somebody else. So I was tickled pink volunteer.
Now, what else, as far as the youth involvement there? Now, you say you went to the Nazarene church probably first.
Oh yes, until I joined Cherrydale. I didn't leave the Nazarene church until grandmother died.
Ah, okay.
Even though I wanted to leave and I wanted to be at Cherrydale, but the tie was so close between my grandmother and I. She was such a dear. Oh, it just was. I know we're all supposed to be saints or Christians, but she was a real saint.
She must have been.
Oh, she was. And anything go wrong during the day, she'd say, "Dorothy, let's go pray about it." We'd go upstairs. We shared the same bedroom. She had a little rocker, a little slipper rocker. We'd kneel down by that rocker and pray.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, she was a dear. And do you know something else you probably never heard of? We had a bolster in the bed because we used just a double bed, but she says it's not healthy for an adult to sleep with a child. So she made this bolster, if you know what I mean. I don't know, like a long pillow. And we laid that between us at nights. We went to sleep. But oh, she was a wonderful nurse. And if I came in sick with a fever or something, well, instead of antibiotics, she made the best hot milk soup, and she would float some of those big crackers in it and bring up to me. I've tried to make it. I can't make it like she did.
Oh, you have the recipe?
No.
Oh.
Wish I did.
Yeah.
And then she would put boiling hot water in the jar, you know. It came up about this high. It wasn't full of water, but she'd stick my feet in that hot water to help bring the whatever I had out of me. And that's pretty good recipe, I'll tell you. And then she would put some blankets on the radiator and get hot in the wintertime. Warm blankets, then put on my chest and rub my chest with Vicks salve. Oh, she knew all kinds of practical things to do.
And she was a midwife, wasn't she?
She was a midwife, yes, when she was younger. She sure was. And I know the Kelly family in Park Lane had 6 children. I think she helped deliver all 6 of them. And then she would stay with Mrs. Kelly for a week or so, help out in the home until she got a little stronger. But she just was wonderful.
So her husband died young?
He was only 40-some, I think, with pneumonia.
Oh.
And didn't she die on Thanksgiving morning?
Yes, I'd forgotten that. I think she did. And Nanny couldn't get over I wasn't shedding any tears. And of course, I knew she was a Christian. I knew she was with the Lord. But I also knew she'd stuffed a little money aside in an old powder box. She says, "Now, Dorothy, if anything happens to me, you give this to your mother." I don't remember. It might have been $50. I don't know what it was. But money was so scarce that day. And then I was tickle pink to give that money to Nanny.
Going back to Aunt Myrtle and Uncle Benny, I've heard a story told about him that he was, what, a conductor, is it, on the railroad there?
Yes.
Is that the Old Dominion Railroad, I guess?
Yes, he was. He was more than that. He worked right there at the station and had to give the trains the go way to start. I don't know, maybe you called him a starter? There was another name. But he had been a conductor first, right on the trains, going up and down the line to Bluemont and Great Falls.
But he was at the Falls Church station.
Well, he was at the Roslyn
Oh,
station
was he?
when I knew him, I don't know about Falls Church. Maybe he was. If he was, she was. But at first, the station in Roslyn was back. It looked like they just took a bulldozer and dug the ground out to the left of that transit building, that red brick Capitol Transit building. And the opening went way back, and they had a stone wall at the very back, and steps went up by that stone wall to go up the street above. But there was an office down there, and tracks, of course, for the trains to come in. But then they moved to Roslyn. They had a nice station there, where the hot shop is today. I guess it's still there, is it? I don't know.
Actually, they built a hotel on top of that.
Oh, really?
Marriott changed their mind about the hot shop. They put a hotel.
Well, I haven't been in Roslyn for so long.
Yeah.
But that's where the train station was in Roslyn, on that spot.
Because that's where the tracks went on up the hill then, weaving back and forth with Lee Highway several times. That's what I remember. Yeah. You ever remember any accidents on 3-lane Lee Highway? That's what I remember. 3 lanes on there, and the middle lane was for passing. And that was a curvy road going down through there. Of course, that's all gone now with 66 being built. It's a nice straight throughway through there now. But yeah. Well, now I heard a story, back to Uncle Benny. I heard a story that he was pretty good at acting drunk. Do you remember how he used to...
Oh, yes. He could do that anytime. That was came natural for him to put on a whole show.
And never drank a drop in his life.
No, I guess he never. Not that I know of.
But he was an actor then, huh?
He gave me away when I got married.
Oh, that's neat.
And he died on Sandra's 3rd birthday.
Oh my, how about that?
We were living on Powhatan Street.
Oh. Huh, how about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any memory.
He was really something.
Yeah, he was a sweet old dear.
Trying to think who else we can talk about here. Who was your favorite, I guess it'd be aunt of the Nanny's sisters? I don't mean to pick favorites. Maybe you better not say who your favorite was.
It wasn't Aunt Carrie.
It wasn't Aunt Eva.
It might have been Aunt Eva, I don't know. Let me think. She was always buying something.
Oh, yeah.
And she bought for Thelma, too. I guess she didn't want to hurt her feelings. I remember she bought, I think she bought me a banjo and Thelma a ukulele, I believe. It's kind of like a guitar.
Guitar, yeah.
And that was quite popular when we were growing up. I never did much with the banjo. That wasn't my dish.
That's not the one my dad tried to play, was it?
It might have been.
Might have been, okay. Because I remember he tried to learn to play that, but he didn't stick with it. I know that.
Might have. No, I loved the piano. That was my pride and joy.
Absolutely.
I had 2 years of it, that's all.
Oh. Took it the rest of the way yourself, huh?
Yeah. I had first one teacher that was living there in Cherrydale. She was a senior at W&L. I think her last name was Hooper. And when she graduated from high school and had to go to college, I had to get another teacher. So I got Gwendolyn Smith, who was in our little church on Park Lane. And, she played beautifully. And after she'd give me a 30-minute lesson, I'd say, Gwendolyn, play some of the hymns for me now. I like to watch her, because she had long fingers. 2 of mine would make hers, I guess. She could reach the biggest octaves you ever saw, and improvised with the hymns so beautifully that I caught a lot of my desire to play from her, I guess, too. But then she went to college. So then Nanny found a regular, old-fashioned piano teacher. But I was a nervous wreck. And when I would play and make a mistake, she would say, no, 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 no. Oh, man, she hollered out at me. And I broke down and cried. I couldn't take it. I think it was a time in my life, too, when my nerves weren't too strong. But she said, oh, I said, I don't want any more lessons. So that ended the piano lessons. And this lady says, oh, if I'd have known she was so touchy or like that, I wouldn't have corrected her like that. I would have been different, you know, but it was too late then. I didn't want any parts of it. So I just kept practicing anyway. I never stopped playing.
Good. Yeah, it shows.
Well, I don't know. Of course, I never learned to cook, though, till I got married.
Oh, well.
Oh.
And she never had to wash the dishes, because her grandmother would say, no, I'll wash the dishes, you go and play the piano.
Yeah. Play the piano, draw some pretty pictures, or study my Sunday school lesson. I was teaching Sunday school at age 12.
Oh, really?
I had a class of boys, only 4 of them, but they were mischievous at junior age, and nobody in our little church would teach them.
Oh, boy.
They tried, I think, and gave up. So I was having a weekly children's Bible club, like, in my home, on my own. And I guess they heard about it, I don't know. So somebody asked me if I would teach the boys, and I said, sure. I took them for a hike the first Saturday.
Oh, yeah?
Down to the Potomac River from Park Lane. And after that, I never had a bit of trouble with those boys. They would come in Sunday school and sit down.
They were on your side then, huh?
Yeah, we were friends. Now, of course, I also tried to have illustrations, if I could, to illustrate the lesson. Either I drew something, or I cut a picture out of a magazine, something like that.
But she is quite an artist.
Oh, yeah.
That's right, yeah. Now, was that at the Cherrydale? Was when you taught Sunday school, or the Nazarene?
Nazarene Church.
Nazarene Church.
I taught at Cherrydale too, but of course I was older there. But
Well, now, your piano playing got you to help out with a radio broadcast that I'd asked you about before.
Yeah.
What was that, WEAM, I think, was the
I think so, yeah.
station? What do you remember about that program?
Well, I was Aunt Dorothy.
Oh, you were, huh?
Mr. Ryerson was Uncle Bob, and Mrs. Ryerson was Aunt Ruth. And Pastor Ryerson was very good at that, conducting that. We'd come on the air with Boys and Girls for Jesus, real fast. And we always had some children in the studio to help out, singing and whatnot. But it was very good. Art Lamb was the station announcer that was always on duty in another room next to ours.
Was that like on Saturdays or something?
Yeah, Saturday morning.
Uh-huh.
And I don't remember what time, but I was living on Edison Street, and I know I'd walk over to Wilson Boulevard, catch a bus, go down, and get off in the area of the courthouse, whatever street that is. And this studio was upstairs in the bank building. I guess it was Arlington Trust. I'm not sure, but it was a big bank building there, and it was upstairs.
So how long did that go on?
I don't know, till Pastor Ryerson left. I don't remember when it started, but it had been going about a year when Sandra was born, I think. Because she was a baby, and I would have one of the girls, I forget her name, who lived close by, came to our church, would come in and babysit for me when I went to the broadcast. I don't know.
And was that like a Bible story time, or what did they do during the program, actually?
Well,
I mean, singing songs, of course. I'm sure they did that.
Sang songs. And it was only a 15-minute, I think.
15 minutes?
I believe so. He always had a good story of some type and made it very interesting. He was very, very handy, very good.
Uh-huh.
But then when he left, there was a couple there from Washington Bible College that wanted to move right in and take over.
Hmm.
But Pastor Jackson said no. I think he was the next pastor.
Mm-hmm.
So we shut down the children's, what was it, Bible treasure chest? Yeah,
Oh,
that's what they call
Bible treasure chest, that's
it.
it.
And there was no more of that. But then Sherrydale, of course, went to broadcasting on Sunday.
Uh-huh.
Not right away, maybe, but
Right.
Eventually.
Uh-huh.
And
So was
Sandra was about 3 then, and had to stop her from singing because her voice was so loud, it would have gone right over the radio.
Oh.
And she wasn't off key, but she didn't know the words, of course. 3. She just would open her mouth and let the music flow.
Oh, that's
Well, I hated to stop her.
Oh, my.
Well, did Ricey and then the pastor that married us, wasn't he between there and Pastor Jackson's? What was our pastor's name that married Jack and me?
Wasn't it Ryerson?
No,
It
Was
wasn't?
Brown?
no,
No.
isn't that awful?
Brown married Malcolm and I.
Oh, so he preceded Ryerson. Okay. Well, we have this all written down somewhere.
Oh, my. It's awful to forget those things.
How about that?
I know he didn't, whoever it was, didn't like the way I played the organ. You've got to play it louder when they leave. Louder, louder, louder. I played as loud as I could. Who was that?
Huh, I'm trying to think too. Huh.
I don't, it wasn't Jackson.
I should be.
No,
I should be.
Well,
I don't know.
all right. Well, that's okay. And did you realize we've been on WFAX now for over 50 years?
Really?
The same station, the same time slot, and just this past September, when we went to 3 services in Sunday morning, we had to change doing it from live to pre-recording the first service that we have and then playing it back over the radio the same day just an hour and a half later. So that's what we've had to do because we start our 3rd service at 11:30 instead of 11 o'clock. But Cherrydale received an award about 2 years ago now for being, they call it a milestone award for the National Religious Broadcasters.
Oh.
And so we have that up in our radio room now. But they were on there for 50 years, same station, same time slot, same program, you know. So,
And that's something.
and I think, of course, we're WFAX's longest term program too. So,
Yeah.
because they just got the award, I think it was 1 or 2 years before that, for being on the air for 50 years. So we were real close in there as far as them starting. We must have gone right on it pretty much as a new station. So we were real pleased about that. But
Well, that's nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think what else we can talk about here. See any good questions on there? Your first date with Robert, how did that come about now?
Well, before I had my first date with Robert, your daddy questioned me. On the way home from this anniversary dinner and celebration at Cherrydale,
75th
Greg and I stopped in at your house there in Bryce, and at the table, I remember Jack saying, Dorothy, didn't you and Robert used to go to the corner store and get ice cream cones, something like that? Because Robert used to come down to the house to see me at the time I was playing the piano for him, but we were just friends, that's all it was. But I would give him suggestions about what to do for special services. And so he would drop by the house just any time. We'd sit out on the front steps together, talking, and that's all. But we never went up to the corner store to get ice cream cones. But it was funny how Jack asked about that.
Okay, so then what happened?
Well then, that was in the fall. The following year, in March, around the middle of March, I called Robert myself. I started it. I don't usually do things like that. But I was all alone. I had pushed Greg out the door when Malcolm died. I wanted everything to myself. I was just worn out. So after I got my strength back and rested up, then I took the trip to Florida. And while I was down there, Joyce, I don't know, anyway, Joyce suggested I come to St. Luke's Hospital, which was on the west coast of Florida, to have my eye operated on. It was a Christian hospital, all Christian doctors. So I said, well, maybe I will. She says, you could stay at my house. She lived in Clearwater then, and they send a van over and pick you up. Well, I called St. Luke's and made an appointment. So then that made me think of Robert, I think. I don't know why. I knew he lived in, or I was told he lived in where did I live? Daytona Beach.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And his mother had lived there for a good many years before she died. So I called information and got his phone number and called him up. And just as a friendly chatter, and he says, gee, Dottie, it's good to hear your voice, just like that. And I thought, gee, he sounds very friendly. He always was friendly, but unusual. And he said, where do you live? And I said, Greenville, South Carolina. And that's all I told him. And he didn't ask me for any more of an address. And I asked him if he'd been traveling and if he'd remarried. And little questions like that, you know. So we chatted for a while. And don't you know, about a week later, I got a letter from him, a note. He went to the public library in Daytona Beach and looked my name and phone number and address up in the telephone book.
Oh my God.
I didn't know they had books like that. And so that's how he knew where to write. And he wrote this note saying that he was not going to, or he would be having company at the time of my operation. He was sorry, but he hoped that I got along all right, hoped I had a good doctor. He would be praying for me. And, oh, I felt so guilty at getting that letter. And that came at Easter, whenever that was. Sandra and Greg were both visiting me there in Greenville. And I wouldn't even show them the letter. I felt so guilty about it. I thought, what have I done? Anyway, it wasn't long before he started calling me on telephone every Saturday night. Oh boy, that lifted me up, and I had gotten kind of down in the dumps after Malcolm died. And boy, hearing from him just lifted me up. I had not a worry in the world. So then he says he wanted to see me, but he said I have to drive my big red, that's what he called his red Pontiac convertible, an older car he had. He was going to give to Bob Haney's wife. Bob Haney was his good friend from California that he went railroading with. So he and Bob had come out here, and he drove the Pontiac toward California. Robert didn't make the whole trip. They were someplace in Texas, and he got word that one of his brothers died, Bill. And so he called me on the phone, and he said, well, he had been calling me quite often, but anyway, this night he said, I've got to come back home and for the funeral and all. And he said, after I finish getting the legal papers and whatnot taken care of, I want to come up to see you. So I said, fine. So that's what he did, and he said he was going to come be at my house, I think he first said on Tuesday, and because he had to stop off and give some papers, Navy papers, to a naval guy in Charleston, South Carolina. Well, he decided not to make that stop. As he started up the road, he just kept it going. So he called me on a Monday and he says, I'll be at your house next day. Anyway, it was one day sooner than it would have been. So he got to my house just about the middle of the next day, like he said. And oh boy, the minute he walked in the door, he said, why did you call me? I said, I really don't know, Robert. That bugged him, but anyway, we were no longer just friends. And we got along fine, and he was there. I did tell him, I said, you know, I've got a 4-bedroom house here, but I cannot invite you to stay here because I have neighbors that would frown on it, I'm sure. So I said, you'll have to get a room in a motel. That's all right, that's all right. He got a room in a motel, but boy, he'd have breakfast there. After he had breakfast, he was right over at my house. He didn't waste any time. So, and of course, I wasn't driving then, and I had this beautiful blue Lincoln Continental parked in the garage. So we took that out, and I wanted to get the air conditioning checked on it, and things I had to check on in town. So he drove me any place I wanted to go. He drove me, and we just got along real, real well. And by Friday, it was a real love affair by Friday.
How many days was that?
Monday to Friday. And he had a ticket to fly to California. He was going out there for some reason, so I let him leave his car in my driveway. He was just driving, I think, a Ford then, but anyway, we got along fine, and when he came back, he said, now, once you have your suitcase packed when I come back. Oh, before he left, though, he told me he loved me on Friday night. And he took a chain, a gold chain, and put it around my neck. And I gave him my little miniature picture of myself that was made when I was 21,
There
young.
you go. There you go.
Glamour picture.
So he carried that with him, showed it off to everybody. He was just visiting his family, but then, when did I had the operation on my eye, then I know. And I wasn't able to go to Florida to have the operation on my eye because in the meantime, I went out in the backyard and, I had a wonderful time weeding and trimming and we had a lot of trees out there and they all seemed to have ivy vines growing tight around every one of them. So I began pulling those ivy vines off, and of course, you know, the dust from the ivy fell right in my face, and I got not just bronchitis, but asthmatic bronchitis. I was never any sicker in my life. So I did not go out in the yard and work again. I love to work in the yard, but anyway, I had to cancel my appointment in Florida to have my eye done. And I decided to have it done in Greenville then, by my regular ophthalmologist. And I did. And I told Robert, though, before that, when he proposed to me, I told him I couldn't marry him. And because I didn't know how long I'd have eyesight, my one eye, good eye, had gone bad, and I didn't know. I went to a specialist, retina specialist, to see if they could help me. Excuse me, and he said no, there wasn't anything he could do for me. And he examined my eyes for about 2 hours. And I said, well, how soon will the other eye go bad? He says, I don't know, maybe next week. Oh, I came out of there feeling great. I was going with Robert and hoping he would propose, and he hadn't yet, and I thought, gee, that ends perfectly good love affair, arrangement, or whatever. So I told him, I said, I don't know how long I'll have my eyesight. And he said, well, it doesn't matter. He says, I hope you don't lose it soon, but if you do, it doesn't matter. He says, I'll be your seeing eye dog. I thought that was real sweet.
Yeah, that's sweet.
Well, he was always willing to help me with anything around the house, because he was used to doing his own work and his own cooking. When I married him, he was cooking really well-balanced meals every day for himself. He always had a vegetable and a starch and a meat, and even chicken. He'd buy pieces of chicken and mix up some flour, season it in a paper bag, and shake the chicken up in that bag and put it in the oven. And he baked cakes from box mixes, baked cakes, and he didn't like the bought icing. He made his own icing.
So tell us how he actually did propose to you then. Was the seeing eye dog thing the proposal, or?
No, but let's see. Yeah, I guess that was the day he proposed. That I told him that. Sure, it had to be. But we went downtown in Daytona to the jewelry store. I forget the name of it now. And he bought me this engagement ring. Had it fitted on my finger. And of course, they had to set it, put this loose stone into the ring itself. So they said, well, you go out for an hour or so and we'll have it done when you come back. So we went out for lunch, and then we went back and picked up the ring, but he didn't put it on my finger, and I wondered why. When we got home, he came in the living room and he said, now you come over here and sit down in my chair. And I did. He had a chair like this. And he knelt down on the floor in front of me and proposed again. And of course I said yes. And when we called California then, boy, his daughters were thrilled. Oh, they were so happy. And I think everybody was. I think Sandy and Greg was the one that resisted a little because he didn't know Robert.
And Fred a little.
Really? Well, I didn't know that. Fred didn't tell me. But Greg was very outspoken. Well, Mom, I thought you loved Daddy. How can you love anybody else?
Oh.
I said, well, it's a different love, but I love him. So he came down, visited me one weekend when Sandra was there, and Robert came down at the same time in Greenville. And when Greg met him, he fell for him too. He started calling him Pop right away. Well, Robert had such a nice way about him. He was so friendly. So Greg thought the world of him. And when Greg was visiting us once in Daytona, we were eating out at a restaurant, and one of the old ladies from our church was there, and she came by and stopped at our table, and Robert introduced Greg as his son. And that really touched his heart. This is my son. And she says, why is his name different? It wasn't Walt, but that didn't matter. Well, I've got to get back on the track. Where was I?
Well, you're doing fine, because the next thing is, where did you get married? In Daytona right there?
No, in Greenville.
Oh,
We came
Greenville.
right back, and I was scared to death. We decided to get married over Labor Day weekend that same year. And I thought, oh my, I wonder about the pastor. Well, we asked him right away, and he said he was available. He said, I figured you all would do something like that. And then after the wedding, he said, I would have done this wedding for nothing. And he took whatever Robert gave him. So it was, and I've got that on video
Oh, wonderful.
of the wedding. I
Oh,
wouldn't
great.
take anything for
Yeah,
that.
that's great.
It's not done professionally,
Yeah,
but one of the men there in the church had just gotten a video camera,
yeah.
so I asked him if he would do it for me.
Great.
He said, sure.
Huh.
So I'm just so glad to have it. Just a short ceremony and a small room that was set up like a chapel.
Oh.
But, because we didn't invite the whole church. We could have, but I thought it was foolish. I didn't want to walk down a long aisle.
Yeah, really.
So,
What, did you go on a honeymoon then?
yeah, well, the first night we just stayed at a hotel in Greenville.
Uh-huh.
Which hotel was it? One of the nicer ones, I forget now. And then the next day we drove down to Myrtle Beach.